Alright, so let's dive into some advanced Photoshop. So we've been working with these filters, and as you know, we can turn them on and off with this little eyeball button. Okay, so layers in Photoshop, particularly adjustment layers, so layers that are making adjustments such as photo filter, hue, saturation, curves, and levels, all are accompanied with what's called a layer mask. So a layer mask, and you can see that just popped up as I was hovering over this, is this little white square that lives next to the icon for the settings themselves. So a mask is basically, you can think of it as a piece of data. It's like a screen that is telling the computer where and how to apply this effect. So let's just take a look. I'm just going to isolate my effects where I'm just looking at levels. So levels is a pretty dramatic difference. I'm turning it on and off. We're just going to focus on that. So I can click back and forth to select either the levels settings, and in my properties pane that will open up what the levels are doing, versus the layer mask. So I have the layer mask selected, and right now it's all white. And in fact, if I hold down Option and click it, it will show me what the layer mask looks like. This is like a little layer mask preview. If I hold Option and click it again, it goes away. So this is a good way to actually see what your layer mask looks like. So right now, the white is telling me that this effect is applied to the entirety of my image. It's applied to everything, okay? Let's see what happens where, if I have this selected, I'm just going to get a standard paintbrush, that's B on the keyboard, and I'm going to paint with black. You can use X to swap back and forth. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger with the bracket keys and just paint a black line like that. Let's go back to our original image. And what do we notice? There's this line now of the effect where it's no longer being applied. And in fact, I don't have to be actually looking at the layer mask. As long as I have it selected, I can just paint directly on it. So what's happening is I'm unapplying that part of my effect to that part of the image. And if we click on it again, we can see. So to explain how this is working on what's called an alpha channel. And you can think of it like this. White is you're going to see the effect completely, and black is you're not going to see the effect at all. So we're telling it where to apply that effect. Again, I'm just clicking to have my layer mask selected, and then I'm painting with a brush in here. Now, what do you think gray means? If white means use that effect 100% and black means use it 0%, gray, you could guess, means somewhere in the middle. So it's going to apply the effect about halfway. As I'm doing that, you'll see it's kind of applying it halfway. I'm going to go ahead and just fill my layer mask with white. Shift Delete is fill. And I can select what I want to select, so I'll do white, and we'll say OK. So we're back to normal. Okay, we're applying our effect across the whole thing. Let's see layer masks in action by using hue and saturation, and I'm going to do a pretty dramatic effect. I'm going to tint the entire image this kind of green, and I'm going to oversaturate it a bunch. So now I have that layer mask selected. It's white, so it's applying that effect evenly across the whole image. Let's play with this and use our gradient tool, which is this guy right here, or G for gradient. And the gradient tool has a bunch of options at the top of your screen. It has the, these are like presets. Right here it has the different actual gradient settings, so we're just going to do black and white. And then right here is the type of gradient, so this is a standard gradient, then we have a radial, we have a linear. So I'm just going to select my standard gradient. And if you want to see what this would look like normally this would look like this. So I just clicked and dragged a line, and it made black on this side and white on this side and gray in the middle, and I could drag it in different directions to change where that gradient's going, right? So what's going to happen whenever I apply this to that layer mask, I'm just going to delete that layer. When I have that layer mask selected, right, is the parts that are black are going to show the original image, right? It's going to remove this effect, and the parts that are white are going to use the effect to its fullest effect, and the parts that are gray are going to smoothly transition it. So let's select that, and I'm going to draw from left to right. So left side's going to be black, and right side is white. So you can see on the left side we have the original color coming through, And as we slowly build, we're switching over to the other saturation. Let's turn that effect off and go back to levels. I'm going to select the layer mask on levels. And again, if I draw, I can adjust that layer mask. You can see it down here dynamically shifting. So I'm saying how it's going to affect my scene. So let's say I don't really want my levels super harsh in this corner, but I want in the rest of the scene. I can play with that. As we're working with these, it's not at all uncommon to modify layer masks dramatically, either painting directly on them or using gradients. Let's go ahead and go back here. So before, I'm just going to select this levels and fill it with white. Again, that's Shift Delete. And let's have it where it's really only applying to the cat's face. So I selected the radial gradient, which is like a little circle. And if you want to see what that looks like, I'll just make a new layer. So it's going to look like this. So the part that I draw from is going to not have any of that effect, and this will have that effect a lot on the sides. Let's reverse that gradient. Up at the top, we can say reverse. So instead, it's going to look like this. Okay, cool. Let's click on our layer mask. So now if I drag that in my layer mask over the cat's face, I'm going to start at his nose, drag to the side. It's only going to apply that effect on the cat's face. Let's give it a little bit more range. You can see that circle. Just to show you, I'll move the circle around. You can see where that circle is existing. This is how you do really subtle Photoshop effects. Now, it's actually not that subtle at the end of the day, but it doesn't feel like it's an effect, right? It doesn't feel like it's painted on manually or like I had to contrive anything. It's just naturally there. So use this modifying layer masks directly with black and white, right? It's all grayscale. So again, white uses the effect 100%, black uses the effect 0%, and gray is somewhere in the middle. Use that to really diversify how you're applying these effects. You might have one level effect here. Let's duplicate the levels layer. Command J duplicates. And on this one, maybe I have the effect down here, but it looks totally different. Like it's a totally different kind of effect. So play around with this stuff and start experimenting with modifying layer masks and using some of these different presets up here at the top, as well as some of these different gradient effects. You can get some really, really interesting things going on if you'd like to experiment with that more.